Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. This is the one and the only Garth Ennis. How are you, mate?
Pretty good, Andrew. How are you?
I am super well and very pleased that you're here to talk to me about a strip that was extremely successful for you with DC and that I loved. And that strip is Hitman, which is being released in DC's very successful Omnibus edition. And Omnibus #1 is looming on the horizon. How did you feel about Hitman when you look back on it, mate?
Yeah, I'm terribly, terribly fond of it. It was always overshadowed by other more successful projects of mine. Preacher at the time and The Boys since. But it is nice. It's been nice over the years to have people discover it or rediscover it, to come up to me at signings and so on and tell me they were fans at the time, or they've managed to get the trades since before they went out of print. So this omnibus thing, the first one of the two, which is out any day now, it sort of brings Hitman front and center again. It brings it back into the spotlight where I like to think it belongs, because it was a big part of my life for the latter half of the 90s. I wrote it in tandem with Preacher. I was literally writing one episode of each, week in, week out. To see it brought out in such a nice format is very pleasing.
Yeah, right on, mate. Can you? I think what's very interesting about it, I think there are parallels in one sense with your mainstream Marvel universe, more comedy oriented edition version of the Punisher, in the sense that you have to engage with the mainstream DC universe in the way that the Punisher had to engage with the mainstream Marvel universe. But the way you do it is typically you, and you're coming at it from an angle that few DC authors have ever approached. It's the lead character's essential disdain for what surrounds him is a big part of his view, which I always found tremendously enjoyable. How did the project come to be in the first place?
There was a crossover in the DC annuals one year, in which giant monsters from space attacked people and drank their spinal fluid. They were taking over the world the way people like that do. And in one case in 1,000, they would accidentally give the victim superpowers. And I was writing the Demon at the time, the old Jack Kirby character, and John McCrea was drawing it.
Which was fantastic, by the way, mate. I'm a huge Demon fan. I don't think there've been many good versions, but yours is a belter.
It was good fun doing that. I only knew the character at that point really from Alan Moore's revival of it and thing. One of many characters I think that Alan brought far more talent to, sheer ability to, than perhaps had ever been seen on those characters before. And things like the Spectre and Dr. Fate and Deadman and even Swamp Thing himself. And I think brought something to them that no one ever expected and made them make sense in a way that no one could ever have imagined. The Demon was one of those, and that's what I responded to when I read Alan's take on Etrigan, as he's known. And around about the time I was doing Hellblazer, I was asked to take over the Demon from another Alan, from Alan Grant. So John and I are doing the Demon, and they tell us there has to be this annual crossover, and in it, a new character must be created. Now, you can see how DC are being quite clever here, of course, because if they publish 30 annuals, that means they get 30 new characters.
Wow. Yeah.
The one we came up with was Hitman. His name's Tommy Monaghan. He's a low-rent Gotham City assassin for hire. He's really nobody special. But the next thing he knows, he's been attacked by a giant monster from space. It sucked his spinal fluid, given him superpowers, and he now has telepathy and what else does he have? X-ray vision, which are the two laziest superpowers you
They
can
really
think
are.
of, really. Which tells you everything you need to know about my approach to superpowers and how important I think they are to the character.
What was
I-
that event called? Was it called Bloodlines?
it was called Bloodlines. It was
Yeah,
appalling. It was absolutely
it
appalling.
was nonsense. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What we couldn't have foreseen, John and myself, was that when we came up with this character, this beer swilling slob of an assassin, and gave him superpowers and called him Hitman, although no one ever really called him Hitman. He was
Yeah,
always Tommy Monaghan. Um, that he would, and the world around him would morph into its own special thing. The character himself, maybe he's not the most original guy, but the strange little corner of Gotham City that we put him in and the freak show that we populated it with, they were something special.
yeah,
And they gave, when Tommy spun out of the demon and got his own book, they gave the comic Hitman its own particular character. That's something that no one could really have foreseen, least of all John and myself, who were sort of proceeding one uncertain step at a time, out to have fun, convinced that the bloody thing would be cancelled next week anyway, got nothing to lose. Let's just have a laugh. And the next thing we knew, it had lasted 5 years.
yeah,
So we did quite well out of that one.
yeah. No, for sure, absolutely for sure. That during that 5 year run, and if I remember correctly, didn't you go back and add some stuff a few years later as well? Didn't you return to him at one point for a
Yes.
final for a coda, if you will?
Yes, about 5 years later, after the, let's say, very final last episode of Hitman, we went back and did a flashback story,
Yeah,
which tied some of the things, some of the elements, uh, as regards the character's participation in the DC universe, together quite nicely, I like to think. And other things have appeared over the years. Tommy hung out in a bar called Nunan's,
yeah,
uh, which had a number of weirdos drinking in it, uh, not least of which was Six Pack, the alcoholic superhero, and the sort of super team of weirdos,
yeah.
Section 8, that he was a part of. They got their own book. Six Pack got his own book. So over the years, John and I, or sometimes just me by myself, we've popped back into Noonan's from time to time just to see what's going on and just to see if there's a good story we might be able to drag out of it.
And it must be nice to have created a small enduring part of the DC universe that lives on and will live on beyond you, because even though you make that deal with the devil, right, that you're working with corporate publishing, so you're not owning what you're creating, you might have a great deal with, might treat you well and whatnot, but I guess the corollary to that is you get to contribute to this big meaningful pop culture tapestry in some way and have a bit of it that's your own. I'd feel quite good about that if it was me.
It's nice to take the big pop culture tapestry that is the DC universe and drag it through the dirt of the floor of Noonan's bar and push its face into a puddle of beer. That kind of thing, like put a cigarette out in the back of its head occasionally. That's what Noonan's bar means to me. Yeah.
Very, very well said. When you look back over those 5 years, are there any highlights that stick in your mind that are personal favorites?
Um, bum, bum. Some of the more serious stories, like For Tomorrow, which was
Yeah,
about which was Ringo's story, Ringo Lam being the uh Asian American hitman who hung out in the bar. He was the most direct reference to Hitman's origins, which I should explain, were the fantastic Hong Kong two-gun action movies of the late 80s and early 90s, the
yeah,
John Woo,
yeah.
Ringo Lam. I've just realized, sorry, the Ringo in the book is Ringo Chen. The guy I was thinking of is Ringo Lam, the
The
director.
director, yeah,
Movies like The Killer, Hard Boiled, A Better Tomorrow, Bullet in the Head, Full Contact, Once a Thief.
yeah.
Those were the things that John and I were watching at the time, and that was what we kind of shoehorned into the Demon via Tommy and the Noonan's crew, and of course then eventually spun out into its own its own series. So I liked that story because I liked writing Ringo. He had a sort of tragic side to him.
Yeah.
He was based very much on Chow Yun-fat, who's the star of so many of those
Wow.
great movies. I liked the outrageous ones as well. I liked the one with the dinosaurs, because why not
Yeah.
have dinosaurs on the loose in Gotham City? I like the Hitman Lobo special. I did always enjoy Zombie Night at the Gotham Aquarium, where Zombie Gas gets released at the Gotham Aquarium, and
Yeah.
I recall that one, which kicked off the second year of the book, that one was quite divisive in a number of ways, because people who thought they had a grip on what they'd been reading, this slightly off the wall Gotham assassin book,
Yeah.
were suddenly confronted with undead penguins and undead baby seals and resultant malarkey. And I think it threw some of them for a bit of a curve. Other people jumped in with both feet and loved it. But for me, it was 1 year into the book, and the thing defining itself, or at least defining one side of it in fine style. I mean, you ask about my favorites, and there aren't really any Hitman storylines that I don't like. Maybe a couple are a bit long, maybe a couple don't quite come off. But on the whole, I'm fond of the way the thing went.
Yeah.
Mm.
Quite rightly so, mate. I think I think, as to your point about people getting perhaps discombobulated by, what happened with the zombie penguins et al. That is, I think, if you're an aficionado of your work, that like narrative tone mixing is something that's a fundamental part of the way you write. And I know you dial up and dial down how much
Mm.
of it you do, but it's undoubtedly, to talk about a quite dissimilar book, it's a big part of preaching, right? You're always getting wrong-footed by what's happening, how serious or comedic it actually is, how outrageous it is, how heartfelt it is. And
I think, yeah, I think so. And I think, actually, to go back, I think that really does come from 2000 AD. I mean, you
yeah,
you think about classic Wagner and Grant Dread, and you can have pathos one minute and absolute absurdity the next.
yes,
You're not quite sure how you should feel, but you go with it. And then later on, you understand that you were reading something that is actually tonally quite coherent. It's
yeah.
just that they've been leading you up and down the path a little bit. Mm.
And they had that from very, very early on. I mean, it's in the moon-based episode with the armed robbers who keep on transforming themselves into different
Yeah,
golden age Hollywood comedy stars, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's got a pretty brutal ending, that story. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah,
yeah, and but it's got all this great nonsense in, and photorealistic nonsense as well, because Bolland's doing the art and he just have
right.
these incredible likenesses of those characters, right?
Yes,
So
and
there's just so much happening at once.
you've got Charlie Chaplin and Stan and Ollie brutally gunning people
Yeah,
down while smiling and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right. Let's just take a step back for a second onto something you mentioned, which is your love of a love we share of John Woo's oeuvre, right?
yeah.
What are your favorite Woo films?
Um, I, I think it has to be The Killer and Hard Boiled. I know those are the two obvious
Yeah,
ones, but it seems to me that after many great movies, those two, he built what he was doing to the point where he had it off pat. They really are perfect in terms of what he wanted to say. What now, Hard Boiled is slightly more lighthearted than The Killer, in tone. The action is more outrageous. It doesn't quite have that element of tragedy that The Killer does. But those two films, um, I think, show the two sides of John Woo, in quite a nice way.
yeah.
He'd been building to it, and he got there with those two, and he never did anything quite as good again.
I couldn't agree more. The one thing I would add to that, which is would be because I like all the other movies you referenced as well, but the one I would add would be A Bullet in the Head, the
Mm.
extended version of that,
Oh, yeah.
with the crazy kind of car-based gun duel as they're lurching around this vast parking lot with
Mhm.
with semi-automatics, and that's like it's just crazy, and it just goes to really unusual places.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
that's his apocalypse now, really, isn't it?
Absolutely right. Yeah,
Yeah.
spot on. Thank you. But back to Hitman. Yeah, I'm just so pleased that they're collecting it, mate. And as ever, what's one of the things DC have really got right are these omnibus editions, which are beautifully put together and really service the beauty of the artwork in this super well.
Yeah. I should also say that they've done a really nice job. They fixed a lot of the color in the first couple of issues, where I think when the book saw print originally, the separations were screwed up. But John McCrea worked with some of the guys at DC, and they've gone in and cleaned it up. It looks a lot nicer. I can also tell you that Hitman, of all the books I've worked on, probably went out with more typos in it
Yeah,
than anything else. But this has all been fixed. This has all been cleaned up. All the typos have been fixed. This is Hitman the way it's supposed to be seen. So the first book's out, I think, any day, and we're working on the second one, which will collect the rest of the run. That'll be out sometime next year, I think.
mate, that is music to my ears. And Hitman Omnibus Volume One. I mean, that's such great news about the corrections and the type, both the typos and the artwork being where it needs to be. That's what these things are for,
Yeah,
and to not do that would be criminal. That's the real value of it, right?
yeah,
And all of that edition, all that glorious work is available from the links attached to this conversation for order. And Garth, always such a pleasure, mate. I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon, where we'll talk about some of your other upcoming stuff.
excellent. See you then, Andrew.
See you then, mate. Take care. Bye bye. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.